Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing all of the DNFs I've had throughout the year in 2025. Now, just like all of the books I read, I do keep track of every single book I start reading and then decide to put down for one reason or another. I used to be someone who very rarely DNF'd, and I have gotten a little bit better about it, I think because there are a lot of books, since I've started booktube, that I want to get around to reading at some point. So if I'm reading a book that I'm just not feeling it, and I know I have a lot of other books I could get to, why force myself to go through with it, right? But today, I'm going to be talking about 6 books. I think that will be it for this year that I started reading and put down, and my reasons why, even though these aren't really full reviews of the books, just my thoughts on some of these titles. So, the first book I DNF'd, this was actually in January, and I found it in a little lending library, and it was Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawlor. This is apparently like an LGBT classic, although it was published in 2017, and I actually found 2 YouTubers that I follow. They reviewed this book later on throughout the year. This was not for me. I didn't like this. The premise sounds interesting. It takes place in 1993 in, I don't know if it's New York City. I think it's the Midwest. And it's like in the era of ACT UP, and it's still the ongoing AIDS crisis. And so you have this guy, Paul, who has the ability to literally shapeshift into a woman or a different kind of man. And so I guess it's kind of like a modern day Orlando. Now, the thing that bothered me with this, the first thing, was the amount of sex scenes and the way they were written. It felt like a teenage boy wrote this. The sex scenes, they were very crude, and I don't think crude is the right word. They were just like porny. I don't know how to explain it. Just not well written. Just not a fan. But I kept reading. But the thing for me that made me put this down was there was a scene where Paul starts to monologue. I honestly hate this in books where characters start to monologue and you can tell it's just like an excuse for the author's own personal feelings. And he's monologuing about some sort of band or bands and like a music scene. And it was pages and pages of this. And I felt like it was just the author had these thoughts and opinions and they weren't able to publish them elsewhere, so they decided to put it into this book and have the character speak them. And I thought it was some of the most pretentious hipster writing about music ever, and I was like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm not, because it's not super short. This book is like 354 pages, so didn't like it. Not for me. I DNF'd this one. And then the next book, most of these books are actually little lending library books, which, you know, little lending libraries don't generally have the best stuff, was Small Moods by Kowalski. This is flash fiction, and I don't like flash fiction. I have reconfirmed that I do not like flash fiction. I didn't like it in undergraduate reading it, and I don't like it now. I just find it too abrupt, and I have that problem sometimes even with just regular short stories, but that's my biggest issue with flash fiction. And I'm just like, what is the point? That was what I was thinking as I was reading this, so that I put down pretty quick. I think I feel like this is an indie book, but I can't find the publisher on Goodreads. The next book I DNF'd was Jubilee by Margaret Walker. Okay, I read this book, part of this book, this is the second time DNFing this in my life, in 9th grade English class, and I actually liked it for a required book we were reading. It's very long. I think it's like 500 pages or, 497. I don't know why this doesn't get a lot of, I feel like people don't talk about this as much in terms of African American literature about the antebellum era. It's about a biracial slave named Viri, she's the child of the white plantation owner who raped her mother, and it follows her life story, like her whole family history over like a span of 30 years. So I'm sure it's like pretty historically accurate, but I wasn't really. I feel like if you're gonna commit to reading a 500-page book, you really have to be in the mood. I may at some point in the future pick this up again, but I just wasn't. I wasn't fully committed when I was reading it when I picked it up because I was waiting for books from the library. So, and then they came in, and I was like, "We're gonna put this down." So I know it's considered a classic, but I just wasn't really in the mood to read it, right? But just wasn't really grabbing me, and it was quite long. The next book, this is the only book on this list that I DNF'd that was a library book, and I did not get very far, was In the Garden of Monsters by Crystal King. It takes place in Italy in the late 40s, and it's about this model who goes to pose in this garden in Rome or outside of Rome for Salvador Dali, and she's posing as his muse. And I guess it's like a love story where she's drawn to the host there, Ignacio, and the main character, Julia, this model, she has like no memory, or she was like born on yesterday or something, and she's posing for Dali as the goddess Persephone. So there's like a Greek myth woven into this. But the writing was so bad. It was a shame because it felt like, I don't know, it reminded me of like 50 Shades of Grey. And I didn't even read 50 Shades of Grey, but I've read like maybe a page. And I was like, I couldn't do it. I had to put it down. I feel like I had a good premise, or like it seemed promising, and the cover art was really beautiful, but it just felt like very cheesy romantic, like overly sentimental romantic stuff. I don't even know how to describe it. It was just not for me. I was like, no. I read 25 pages and I was done. The next book I DNF'd rather recently is by an author I actually really liked one of her stories, and that is Susan Choi's Trust Exercise. Again, another little lending library book, which I thought for some reason this was about college students. It's about high school students, and I think it takes place over the span of one day, and they are these kids in this high school in the theater class, and there's this weird like exercise that the drama teacher puts them through. I don't even know what exactly, and it follows two characters, David and Sarah. Look, I don't like reading about, I've realized, teenagers having sex. It's just not my thing. I read Normal People, and I saw part of the TV adaptation, and I just don't really want to read about it. Like, yeah, I know what happens, but it's not my thing. And that was like pretty much the book very early on, because then when I looked on the inside flap, I was like, oh, these are high schoolers. Okay. No, thank you. This is not rated very well on Goodreads. Goodreads rated 3.12, which is very, very low. And I feel like a lot of Susan Choi's other works are rated quite well. I mean, she's like a very critically acclaimed literary fiction author. So yeah, I think a lot of other people were not feeling this either. Might be her most polarizing. And then the last book I DNF'd was actually from my own collection, which confirmed to me very early on, yeah, I don't want to keep this, and I unhauled it. And that is Troubled Daughters, Twisted Wives, Stories from the Trailblazers of Domestic Suspense, edited by Sarah Weinman. This features domestic suspense stories by female authors from the 40s through the 70s, and it has women like Shirley Jackson and Dorothy B. Hughes, and oh my God, why am I blanking out on the woman who wrote The Talented Mr. Ripley, Patricia Highsmith. And I was going to read this. I mentioned this in my like spooky TBR for October, and I did start reading it, and then I was just not interested. I was like, it's time to unhaul this. So I didn't even finish reading the first story. It just was not grabbing me. I don't know why I got this. I got this years ago because I was writing a novel that took place in the 40s, and I was sort of trying to make it a murder mystery. Murder mysteries are really hard. It's really hard to write a mystery. it's like a unique talent on its own that I don't know how people do it, because you have to kind of fool the reader but then give red herrings, and it has to really click and mesh into place. And so I think that's why, I know this is why I picked this book up years ago, but I just it's just not, like, my tastes have changed. So yeah, those are all of the 6 books thus far. I think that will be it that I DNF'd throughout the year, and as of today I have read a total of 80 books. So putting down 6 and reading 80 is, I think, a pretty good feat. I don't have like a big DNF count, because I think that it's hard, right? Because there are books that start out really slow and then they get good, and you finish reading it and you're like, I am so glad I stuck with this. And there's others that you don't really like, but you push through and you're done reading and you're like, I'm pissed I wasted my time on this. So it's always a weird, you have to be really discerning to know when to DNF and when not. So it's tricky, and I know everyone is different. But yeah, let me know your thoughts below. Do you think any of these books that I should return to? What were your DNFs throughout the year? What are your thoughts about DNFing in general? Do you do it? Do you not do it? Do you try to be kind of find a balance like I do? Yeah. And if you like this video, please comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.